Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Tester. You guys know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's what we want to do today. We want to get you fired up about my guest. I'll be spending time with Anthony Grant today, and we'll be talking about his book, When Ending a Golden Age Was Good. So go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
My pleasure. Very nice to be conversing with you.
With you as well. Now, as is tradition here on the show, we always give our guests a few moments to introduce themselves to those folks out there that may not be familiar with you or your work. So first question, tell us a little bit about yourself. What makes you, you?
Sure. Blessed to have 5 children, happily married for almost 30 years. We spent over 2 decades organizing and leading various children's ministries, including stateside mission trips, done several VBS camps over the years, had the privilege of leading small boys groups akin to Scouts, except, Christian versions of that, and been certified in a congregational assistance program from a college in Minnesota.
And you are doing some awesome things, and that is so nice. We need people doing more of those good works out there, so that we can continue to move forward. I love it. I love it. Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that this was a way for you to share your knowledge base with the world?
It's changed over the years. I've always dreamt of being an author. From the earliest on, I used to exchange letters with my cousins, and this is before you had Facebook or internet communications. You couldn't email or text each other. So we'd actually, do snail mail and wait weeks back and forth for each other. But we weren't writing about how the weather was at each other's houses. We were actually pretending that we were field generals in a multi-planet universe, and that we would be writing code back and forth to each other. We would send the code and then have to encrypt the letters beforehand so our parents couldn't read it. So that's when we were 8 or 9. So, I've been doing this stuff as long as I can remember. But certainly after the children's ministries and then my own kids being born, and then finally having a daughter as our last child, it changed a lot as far as the intended audience and who I wanted to be able to share the message of Christ with. It was such a profound difference in my life from college on that I know what a big difference it made as a parent to my kids and all the kids I had a chance to interact with, that if I could have some fun with it, it's something that I definitely wanted to be able to do.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love that that you were able to assess that and say, okay, here's some changes that need to be made, and how can I change the style. I tell so many people that when you become a parent, it really does make you the best person that you could possibly be. And, and because you learn so much about yourself, because you do want to offer your best self to your children, so that your children in turn can be their best self. So I love that you did that. Now, the title of your book, When Ending a Golden Age Was Good. Curious title. You have to tell us, how did you come about that title?
Well, that's twofold. The story is about a dragon, and the dragon embodies evil, and both figuratively and literally. But I looked at the country around us and what was happening to our society, and it was, as a parent, it was really hard to find cartoons, literature, anything that I felt safe for my kids reading. And my wife and I would sit down and be like, "Oh, we can't can't watch this, I can't read this. I was like, well, I'm just going to start writing my own stuff. But the title is specifically is really about greed. You think of golden ages in society, and it's kind of the epoch of that civilization when they're blessed with incredible riches. And a lot of people see it as sad, but it seems like we're most faithful to God when things aren't going so well. And I look at the material wealth that our country has, and it's unprecedented. And I see so many people. When I was going to high school, 92% of people in my state of Wisconsin profess to be Christians. And I've seen that really erode over time. And I go back to that material comfort that so many people in this country have. And, you think of a dragon that loves to sit on its treasure and hoard it, and greed just sets in because it has so much wealth. And so this dragon is called Spirimallum the Golden. And so when he gets, his life ultimately gets ended in the book, spoiler, it's the end of his golden age, but it's also kind of a poetic idea of sometimes when a golden age is ended, God works through that. You look at like the Great Depression, you look at World War II, you look at the Spanish flu that those generations went through, the Dust Bowl era, and they were refined through that and came out much stronger people because of it. And a lot of them were very faithful people. It was a very faithful generation because of they didn't have everything. And ultimately, that's how the title was born.
Oh, I love it. And you're so right. I was just talking about that the other day, and my listeners know that my grandparents were born in 1903 and in 1908. And for them to have been in my young adult life is amazing. Most people's grandparents, first of all, weren't that old to begin with, but I was really blessed to have that wisdom and knowledge from that group to hear about the stories and how they dealt with all of that. And because I was we were talking, like you said, about the Spanish flu, and I said I can't imagine. My grandmother was 10 years old in 1918 when the flu broke out. Wow, I wish I could hear her stories right now. She's passed on, but I wish I could hear what they did and how did they feel about it, and how did they get through, because sometimes it is in that learning of past generations that you're able to adjust accordingly now. I love that you're pulling on that wisdom. I love it. I love it. Now, there may be some folks out there saying, well, it sounds like you're sharing some great information. Why did you choose to do it in a children's book as opposed to a traditional novel or something for adults? Why was it important to write it in a way that children would be able to understand?
Well, I was looking at the genre that's out there, and there's, if you look at Christian genre in particular, there is so many devotionals out there for marriage, for money issues, for retirement, how to deal with depression. But if you look at children's literature, and again, this goes back to parenting, there just wasn't a lot out there. You would have a lot of children's stories that were literal Bible stories that were put into, coloring illustrations and things like that to simplify the message. But there didn't seem to be a lot out there as far as that specific age group. And this goes back to the ministries that I had with children, where I was just frustrated there wasn't a lot for them to read. And a lot of parents would echo the same sentiments my wife and I had, just like, well, other than C.S. Lewis, I mean, and maybe Tolkien, what do your kids read? And we just had a pretty short list. So ultimately that's what caused me to go down that specific path. But what actually was the catalyst was when my daughter was born, because my oldest son was in third grade or second grade at the time, and he had a teacher that had parents sign up for a week where they would read to their class. And I had the opportunity to sign up after my daughter was born because I knew I would have time off for paternity leave. And I asked her if it would be okay if I actually wrote a story instead. So that's how this book was actually created, because she was excited about it. And when I came in, it was about her 4 older brothers saving their baby princess from a dragon. And the story just grew from there. And every time she invited me back into the class, I had that chance to expand the novel and continue developing the characters and things like that. But it was really that teacher encouraging me to get this published that actually ended up having me go that direction as far as children's literature goes.
You know, I find it so interesting that in all of the authors that I have spoken with, there's always that one person who really is the catalyst, or the final person that gives you that personal confirmation of, okay, yes, I need to do this, and let's get started. I'm so glad that people follow that prompting in their spirit to prompt the author or that future author to get out there and write and make a difference. I love it. Now, we're saying that this is a children's book, and I want to make sure that we perk up the ears of some future readers out there. What age group is most appropriate for your book?
If kids that are, like the 4K kindergarten can grasp most of it. I mean, you always see some cartoons where they clearly have a specific audience in mind, but they make it so adults get something out of it too. This book is certainly like that, where you would have this perfect age range would probably be like 2nd grade to probably 5th grade. But I just had a 6th grader get a hold of my novel the other day, stole it out of his mom's hand, and she had it probably for 5 seconds because he knew what was in it. One of his classmates was reading it, and he just, and like I said, that was a 6th grader, so, and he was like hanging on to it during church the entire time. So hopefully he wasn't reading and he was paying attention to the sermon, but but I've had adults read this too. I had a grandmother that said she went to sleep with it by her nightstand, to give her comfort later on, because she liked how one of the grandparents in this book was kind of describing when she was newlywed to her husband and some of the sacrifices that they had to make together, and she just found that relationship so sweet that years after she read it, she still had it on her nightstand. So I mean, it seems to appeal to a broad range of people, but yeah, that specific age range are probably like 2nd grade to 5th grade.
And I love that in your sharing, and thank you so much for that answer, because we're able to see that though there may be one group in particular that will enjoy it, but it sounds like anyone who picks up a copy of the book can find enjoyment or find a piece of themselves in the story, and that's really good too. Whoever is reading will have a good time, even if it's an older sibling reading to a younger sibling, or it's grandmother reading to their grandchild. I love it. I think that is so awesome. Well, Anthony, it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And, of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Of course. Title is When Ending a Golden Age Was Good. And it can be purchased anywhere on Amazon. It's available Kindle, hardcover, and paperback, and of course wherever books are sold. As far as keeping in contact, you can get a hold of my publisher, which is westbowpress.com.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. We are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Anthony Grant, and we're talking about his book, When Ending a Golden Age Was Good. Now, my next question for you, Anthony, is When you were writing, in the process of, putting the story together, how did you choose what aspects you would include, or if you needed to exclude some portions, set the time frame? How do you choose all of those things as an author?
Sure. Well, originally the book was handwritten and it was my children's names, but I had them choose aliases for each one of them themselves. And the only criteria is it had to be a biblical name because I wanted this to basically anything indirectly or directly in the pages, I wanted to be able to draw people not just into my literature, but also to look into scripture as well. So, but something as simple as aliases is biblical names. But some of the things that I love doing as far as the pre-writing or planning stage is the research. I wanted to make this as historically accurate as possible. So while the kingdom itself is fictional and some of the characters in the book is fictional, the time frame certainly is not. And one of the things that I wanted to be able to leave in this book for my children was not just a heritage of their faith, which is the first and foremost, but also where they came from. If you look at the 700s, this actually takes place in 707 AD. The Anglo culture, the Franks, the Celts, the Scandinavian culture, which is most of my children's heritage, they weren't very literary. So there wasn't a lot of literature preserved of that era. So I kind of wanted to put something together that drew from historical significance of that era. I actually do some kind of etymology gradually for their last name and threw that in there for fun. But those historical events, there's a lot going on in the world at that point. You think of some movies where a character is fictional and is intertwined throughout the entire story. This kingdom is fictional, but it's intertwined with the Byzantine Empire. It's intertwined with the Constantinople and the siege of Constantinople later on in subsequent books. It ends with the Battle of Tours, which was a famous battle in Europe at the time. So it like I said, that's my favorite part about it. But I also got into like florals. There was a funeral in a future book, so I had to find the native floral for the area, like in Norway, and the time of year that it'd be growing. I had to research the animals that would be found in that area because, again, authenticity was important to me as far as making this book not just a fun read, but something that would have the kids maybe do and dig in and do a little more research than a typical novel would provide.
And I couldn't agree with you more there, making sure that you do the research so that it stays authentic, not only to the time but to the location. That really and truly is so important. So bravo, good job there, Dad, for making sure that you weren't making it fictitious for them, so that they'll really learn something along the way as well. Now, when it comes to making books different, I don't always like to use that word. Sometimes unique, but even still, that doesn't seem to capture it all. But I want to ask this question, and that is, there are a lot of books out there in the world that are for children. There are books out there that help children with their imaginations, that explain about culture and time and place and all that good stuff. And you've kind of hinted on this answer a little earlier, but what makes your book different or unique from some of the other books that may be a little similar to what your goal was?
Sure. Like I expressed before, I mean, there's not a lot of Christian fiction genre out there that would be like this. Typically, what you see for that age group is just straight biblical stories that you'd find in the Old Testament, New Testament, that are just put to illustrations and maybe simplified language. This one not only goes into, like I said, the historical narrative, but a big thing, and this is in the foreword of the book, I quoted Edmund Burke, and it said, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." And then I also quoted a Romans passage saying, "Fight that which is evil and cling to what is good." And the point that's made with that is you can't cling to what's good if you don't have a definition of what's good. And you can't fight evil if you don't define what's evil, because then everything is just a gray area. So it was important through these pages that from a biblical standpoint, it would say, yes, this is definitely an evil thing that we're fighting. Yes, this is definitely something that's good to fight for and cling to. These promises of God. There's also the point of everybody has a dragon in their life. You see that through a whole bunch of literature. But what makes this dragon different is it's more of the Goliath, where it's insurmountable if we're just trying to take it on our own. You think of why David defeated Goliath, because he knew that God was with him and that he had him fighting with him. He wasn't looking to his own strength to do that. And there's so many things that are going on in this world. I try to think of what my kids are going through, and just the unprecedented 2 years of COVID. And you look at the wars that are going on in Europe right now, and the empty shelves that you might run into, and some of because of the production lines being held up. And those are some scary things for kids. And those aren't things that they can overcome themselves. I mean, you might have a kid that has leukemia in a hospital, and that is a dragon that's insurmountable. But what this book does is it takes a special weapon. It's called the Arrow of a Lamb, a major spoiler there. But the Lamb of Christ, it's drawing off of that. And as long as you can use that weapon, there isn't a single dragon you can't slay in your life. And it points unequivocally to faith in Jesus as something that can overcome anything that is daunting, anything that seems to be beyond our control. And as adults, we need that comfort too. And I think that's why some grandmas take great comfort in these pages, because it is something where you can just understand you can let go and God's got it. And I do think that's different than a lot of children's novels that I've seen.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that you've touched on the things that you have, because you're right. Many times in the conversations that adults have dealing with the pandemic, they're not talking about how it is also impacting the children, the little ones in particular. We know for a fact that as a society, many of the things that we do are based out of having survived the Great Depression. And it takes a long time for those mindsets to change, for those ways of doing things to adapt accordingly. So you're right. At least you're trying to help curve any potential trauma that it may have caused, or any anxiety that it may have induced in the children. And I think that is so wise. Now, I want to ask this question, the overarching question for your book, and that is, if there's one thing that you want to make sure that the little ones understand having read your book or listened to your book, what would that one thing be?
Sure. During difficult times, and it goes back to the point that I just alluded to, we have someone who advocates for us, someone who can slay our dragons that we can't, and that's Jesus. That no matter what they're going through in this world, this vale of tears, it's going to be okay. And to have that just reassurance that I always talk to people, it's like, I can't imagine going through what we're going through right now and not having faith in something bigger than us, that somebody can just hold us in his hands and just hug us and take care of us. And that's the comfort that I want throughout these entire pages. If they don't walk away with anything else, that they remember that as long as they put their faith and comfort in that Lamb of God, that they'll be fine.
Oh, what a beautiful answer. I love it. I love that. Now, when it comes to your future plans, I like to ask this question, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. And that is, are there any future books that you think that you will write, be it that we are still dealing with the pandemic or not? Because for some people it's like, well, if I go back to work, I won't write anymore. But if we're going to stay, in the house a little longer, then I'll probably write some more. But do you think that there are more books in your future, or do you think that this one is it for now?
No, actually, I already have. The book that's listed as a sequel in the front cover of the book is not actually a sequel. COVID kind of gave me a different idea to throw in there first. So I actually have another book. It's called The Day the Princess Danced with Her Daddy the King. And the reason why that was written, and it's still the same family, but my daughter and I kept on getting father-daughter dances canceled for different reasons. When she was 3, she had a fever. The morning of, we couldn't go. And she would always be one of these girls that would buy her dress, and she wouldn't let her daddy, me, see the dress ahead of time. I mean, nobody told her about that whole bridal tradition with their husbands, but she just had in her mind that daddy doesn't get to see this until he pulls up the carriage, my car, to take her to the dance. But then COVID canceled our father-daughter dances. So I'm like, well, I'm going to make this up to her by writing another story. But it is interesting because in this book, the king is actually paralyzed, the one that I actually wrote, that is published when Ending a Golden Age was good. But the readers don't know that. He just sends his sons to slay this dragon, and they don't know why somebody that would have been in his mid-30s didn't go. The second book takes off on that, and he was actually paralyzed in a prior battle. So it's his battle to try to get back on his feet. And it's a shout out to all our wounded warriors that protect us overseas and protect us on our streets, that go out every day and don't know if they're going to come home. And sometimes they come home without the ability to walk. And they might have to go through that rehabilitation process just to do something as simple as dance with their own child. So that book was also written with that in mind for those people. So.
Absolutely, absolutely, and thank you so much for that. So many times people forget as the military families that are here and the all that we go through when stuff is going on in the world. So thank you so much for all of that. And thank you, Anthony, for spending some time with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. We are out of time, but I have enjoyed my time with you here today. Now, before I let you go, can you remind everyone, please, one last time, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
Of course. When Ending a Golden Age was good, and you can get a copy at Amazon, and or wherever books are sold. And then you can get a hold of me at westpopepress.com.
Thank you again for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.